Thank you, Divine listeners, for joining me in episode 4 of the Divine Dialogue podcast, also the end of the Balto series. Can't believe we're already through one film, but we are. So I'm going to go ahead and for this scene, it's going to be kind of a sequence of mini scenes, I suppose you could say, but essentially the whole theme is Balto returns home and we get to see that he is fully integrated. He's successful in bringing the medicine back. Steele is revealed as the fraud that he is. Jenna and Balto, it's implied that they end up together, and we get to reconnect with Rosie in the real world as she's been telling this animated story up to this point, and we rejoin her as an older woman with her granddaughter in the park because they went to go visit the memorial of Balto. So essentially the scene recap, Balto just got through the icicle cave and he managed to save all but one vial of medicine. We do see Boris, Muck and Luck, outside in the snowstorm. The town is dark and gloomy and all the lights are out because the town assumes the mission was unsuccessful and no help will be coming to the children. But then Boris hears Balto's howl. Balto sees the northern lights and he says Jenna as he jumps and sprints forward. The town wakes to the wild call of the wolf, lights flood on, and the sled team stops outside the doctor's office. And Balto has a moment of being unsure because the humans remove his harness from him, but as his ears go back anticipating rejection and disdain, they actually give him pets and they praise him. And one of the men ushers him into the doctor's ward and says someone wants to see you, and it's Rosie. She's up in bed. He brings her musher's hat to her, and she says something so beautiful. She says, "I would have been lost without you." And just before this, Steele is in a shack, playing with bones, telling wild stories that are completely untrue, and he also hears the howl. And then another dog walks into the shack just a few moments later and tells everyone that Balto's returned with the medicine. And what's interesting is Steele continues to try to just tell the story as if what had just happened didn't reveal all of his lies. And even the most egotistically entranced female dog turns on him. She calls him absolutely disposable. And it's a particularly nice touch that Steele also hears the howl, like I said, because it becomes a sound of resonance and truth rather than a sound that inspires fear and distrust. And the howl is almost a bell for the town. Here's what rings true. Here's what's been false all along. So essentially we come full circle with the Northern Lights that we had talked about in episode 2. They were never just a clever romantic ploy for Balto to impress Jenna. They were literally a way for him to follow his true north, which led him home. He had successfully taken the broken bottles and positioned them within himself to catch the light and integrated his white wolf, which he had to go into the wilderness, reclaim his wolf part, descend to the bottom of the shame and the guilt, which was the mountain, and return home a whole wolf dog. And doing this was his soul medicine, and that's the medicine that he brings to the children, literally, in a physical manifestation. And I do think it's also very important to talk about the energetic limitlessness that doesn't really care about form or gender. We tend to get caught up in that as humans, I think, but essentially Balto had integrated his dog and his wolf, and in so doing, he balanced his masculine and his feminine. The wolf being the feminine because that's what guides him home, the dog being more the masculine, the mind, and so he's completely integrated by this point. And to Jenna, that's incredibly attractive. We see a little moment where she gives him this side look and she casts her eyes down and back up at him. And for those of you who have seen The Lion King, which is a movie we'll be going into later, Nala does the same thing with Simba. She gives him this look, a very seductive look, essentially telling him, if you integrate, if you come back and grow into who I know you could be, if you become the king I know you could be, I'll be your queen, essentially. And Jenna's telling Balto the same thing. You integrated, you are balanced, you don't have, I mean, everyone has ego, but you don't have, ego is not guiding you. Your soul is guiding you. And that's insanely attractive to her because her soul is guiding her too. Because the town, you know, was basically in opposition to both of their northern lights. And they both follow their northern lights. And when you follow it, someone else follows it, you both reach the lights together, then the natural wanting and desire of each other is going to follow from that. So I thought that was a really cool touch that they had her kind of cast that look at him. And essentially, we also see at the very end of the scene, before we go back to out of the animated part of the movie and back into the real life version where we started, that there are the northern lights. They just show a still shot of that, and then it transforms into a wolf that howls. So it's literally a full integration, taking the shape of Balto when he has the northern lights integrated, so he becomes that howling wolf. And we'll go ahead and get into the personal mirror here. And for me, this is quite straightforward. I did touch on this in the first episode with when Balto rescues the hat, and he is afraid to answer his call, that, you know, this podcast is part of my Northern Lights rhythm. And I would encourage you, just as we close out this series of Balto, that it's deeply important to be creative, however you can be. I really think you should do it. If that's art, if that's writing, if that's singing, if that's pottery, whatever it is, make things. Immerse yourself in that creative flow, because not only is it inspiring and uplifting, but it's also deeply regulating. And I think it's also very important to have multiple points of the Northern Lights. We see this in episode 2 when he, you know, restructures the broken bottles. It's never just one broken bottle. There's a multitude of broken bottles that he positions to catch the light. And I think it's really important that the Northern Lights are never just one singular point of light in the sky. There's a multitude of lights that make them up. So it's important not to make one thing your Northern Lights. And for me, this isn't the case now, but this is definitely a very powerful personal mirror of the me a few years ago. I've always had the tendency to make a romantic relationship my Northern Lights. Without it, I really couldn't see any stars in the sky or really any other lights. But it's been so fulfilling and important to remember not to flood one area of my inner garden. And this podcast is one part of my garden. Cooking for myself has been another part. Fitness has been another part. And it's just about remembering to create more grooves and channels for water to flow. It's very important to do that. And that's when the Northern Lights really come into view, because they aren't just one point of light. They are many combining into one magnificent light. And the light that comes out of the Northern Lights is you. You just have to nourish it from multiple places and not rely on one avenue or one bucket to feed it. It's very important to have your Northern Lights be a combination of different areas of your life. And my divine questions I have for you today are: have you ever intuitively followed your true north? What happens when you deviate from it? And how do you find your way back to that path? So I have definitely intuitively followed my true north. Again, this is a really good example of it doing this podcast. When I deviate from it, I just notice that I feel imbalanced. This kind of goes back to what I was saying about the points of light being coming from multiple directions and not just one area. It is very important to essentially water all the areas of your garden and not just one. So finding my way back to that is essentially just remembering that there's other areas of the garden. So, and that also goes back to what I had said in a previous episode, that it can be really mundane things that bring you back on the path, because if you don't see the northern lights, you tend to see the broken bottles. So my practice of reclaiming, my true north is to go back to the basics. Like, I'll ask myself in any given moment, what could I do right now to recapture that light? To be able to see that light, I should say, because it's always there. It's just that sometimes if you're in a certain state, you can't see it. But that doesn't mean that the lights go away. It just means your ability to see them and connect with them may be diminished. But there's always a path back to it. It's like when Balto marks the trees, that's a very logistical way to find your way home. But that can be corrupted, as we know, because steel disrupts the trees. But Balto is able to, once he's really reconnected with his northern lights, then he doesn't even need the markings on the trees to find his way home. He just instinctively knows the path. And I really do think that we all instinctively know the path if we really pause and listen and ask, because if we actually sit and ask, you'll get an answer. If you've ever tried meditation, that was definitely a path back to myself as well. And you ask a question, if you're still enough, you will receive an answer. So I think it's just about being committed to what you can do moment to moment, day by day, not focusing on the broken bottles of your past or the broken bottles that could be in your future, and just looking for those northern lights in your everyday. I think that's essential to staying in touch with them. And you can always return to them. It's not even so much that the bottom of the mountain is one journey. I feel like we go to the bottom of the mountain multiple times because there might be something else down there that we forgot to grab. And so we go back down. But the thing is, after you've gone down once, going down again gets easier and climbing back up gets easier because you learn the way, you get stronger, you're able to return faster. It's not about being perfect. It's just about being willing to descend and reascend, and you just get faster at it and you remember more and more until that becomes your rhythm and the programs don't hold as much power as they used to. So that's essentially what I think Balto can teach us, is to always go back to your true north, to integrate, and to find that acceptance inside rather than looking for the outside world to affirm you. Because once you accept yourself, then we see in his case, the town accepts him too. So it always was going to start with him. Because not that it excuses their behavior or the bullying or, the terrible treatment he experienced, but there's something about having shame in yourself, and it makes it easy sometimes for people to grab that and reinforce it in you again. So it's very important to remember that the Northern Lights are always your way back to yourself and are an antidote to, external judgment that just reinforces that disconnect. Which is why I've decided to name this episode The Howl of Truth, because the howl shows up in this movie at this time. It awakens the town. The town is dark. When Balto howls, the town lights up. The howl exposes steel. The howl is received by the town as a sound of truth and resonance and finality, instead of, oh, we need to fear this, we need to banish this from our space, this can't be trusted. So Balto, by integrating the wolf, is actually able to reconstruct the town to orient itself in the same position to him that he has with himself. And that's the thing too that is so powerful about integrating, and that's why I chose Balto as the start of this series, because when you really integrate, you have the power to, or at least the ability, the potential to light up the darkness around you too. It's not just when you find your true north and your northern lights that only you illuminate the darkness around you too. And you can definitely inspire change in people around you, in situations around you. You will start to see your visual field, your immediate environment shift as you shift. It's pretty miraculous to see, actually. But it does happen. And so that's why I think Balto is such an important story, because it really does show us what can happen, the energetic shift that can happen when someone is brave enough and whole enough and, doesn't accept the status quo, essentially, of the culture around them. We're going to get into this story at a later date, but Balto and Mulan are very similar, because he leans into his wolf. The wolf is not accepted. Mulan leans into energy that is essentially assigned by the culture to be only male energy. She's not supposed to be a fighter. She's not supposed to challenge the system. She's not supposed to, dishonor. It's considered a dishonor to take the position she takes. Which actually the culture is in a state of dishonor because they're dishonoring the feminine. Same in Balto. The culture is dishonoring the wild wolf. They prioritize and uplift and put dogs on a pedestal with absolutely no counterbalance to that energy. And it takes one really brave soul to integrate those two energies and to show the true blend and true balance of those two energies. And Mulan does the same thing. So whatever's in your life that feels out of balance, whatever wolf part of you that has been calling you back to your Northern Lights, I would leave you with this as we close out the Balto series. Follow that call. Listen for the howling. Go in that direction. It might be clumsy at first. I've been thinking about that with this podcast. My first few episodes might be clumsy as hell. Like, they might be off the wall. They're not scripted. I might be saying and like too much. You might hear my cat in the background. I don't care. I'm doing this to get my voice out there and speak truth to things that I think are very essential. So if it's not polished, that's fine. Just take your first steps, and there's going to be all sorts of little miniature paths that open up to you. And you might take a certain path for a while and then reconnect to another path. And it's not going to be a straight line. It's going to be more like a messy spiral. And that's totally fine as long as you keep advancing. Just follow that call and see where it goes, because there's no shame in attempting and starting the journey, because you never know where you're going to end up. And that's kind of the point. Like, you might end up going back to where you started, and you might bring much needed change and light and clarity to that area, or you might find yourself in a completely different place because you followed that call. So that's what I would leave you with as we close out this 4-episode series here, is follow that call and find your Northern Lights and integrate your white wolf and just see where it takes you. So, divine listeners, I think I will go ahead and leave it there. I've really enjoyed going through this Balto series with you. I hope you've enjoyed it as well. As I've said before, the next stop is going to be Privet Drive with the Harry Potter series. We're going to start with the Sorcerer's Stone, and I believe that's going to be a 7-episode series. I'm going to have to look at my drafts. I've written quite a few for that. Harry Potter and Star Wars are essentially the most important stories to me. So I will be definitely touching on those, but we might jump around because I don't want to get too centric on one story series itself, because, I could make a year's worth of content on Harry Potter. So we're going to start with the first movie, and then I'll probably move to something else. I have no idea what's coming after this, because once I started this podcast, I only knew it was going to be Balto and then the first Harry Potter, but after Harry Potter, I have no idea. And I do say that with also wanting to encourage you to engage with this podcast. Please don't feel shy about emailing me. outside of here and suggesting movies or shows for me to look at. If I haven't seen them, I will gladly watch it if I think that it's going to resonate with where this podcast is at the moment. So please don't be hesitant to reach out. But in the meantime, I will be working on that first episode of the Harry Potter series, and I do hope to see you there. Until then, divine listeners, please follow your white wolf call, integrate, and don't forget your northern lights are your true rhythm. And I will see you in the next one.